Hi, peoples. Welcome to Air Talk number 23.
You don't get people's attention.
Yeah. Dozo.
Hi. So, I wanted to talk about something that's highly relevant for us now. It's the MVP. Actually, I wanted to talk about it like 2 months ago, but then took some time to actually make a presentation and
Needed to make MVP for MVP.
exactly. But so most of you already pretty much know what I'm gonna talk about today. But I think this presentation is not so much about giving you some new insight, but rather try to illustrate some things that you already know. So just give examples. Next, where do I do next? Next here. So, in the basic concept, MVP for them is it's not like this, more like this. So, the reason being that if you are here, you will hardly get anybody to interact with what you're doing or for the purpose that you intend to do. Here, you start with a simple version, like do people want to move faster on wheels? Well, with that, it's going to be hard to test, right? So that's the basic concept. Instead of like building like all these like pieces together and being able to measure, eventually it should be like something simple, minimal, that doesn't have to be your final product or be related to your final product. This is part of the final product. This is not part of the final product. So you build something else that allows you to gather some insight and data from every stage. Some prerequisites with the E that Salah kindly added. So the basic things of what we are doing, we are using like lean startup principles coined by Eric Rice. And the core of it, if you don't want to read the book, although I think you should read the book, let's stop them because then we cannot see.
They're gonna be a basket, so we have to cover.
If you don't stop them now, then you cannot, quit for an hour.
I didn't know that.
Oh.
How do you stop them?
Please press doesn't stop.
This is part of the show.
It's too late.
Can you hold this button?
I could never stop though.
Anyways.
I think these two don't stop. This one does.
So if you don't want to read the book, this is the core of the book, which is that you start building, and then you measure, and then you learn, and you should do that many times so that you learn a lot and you start building the right thing. I think what's core here, and that's what's often misunderstood, is that although it starts from build, you actually work backward. So you start by asking yourself what you want to learn. Because if you build something and you're not clear about what you want to learn, it's very likely that you're going to build the wrong thing. So you start with what you want to learn, and then you have a bunch of questions. And these are your most essential questions, your assumptions. You assume that your core vision that you define in your in-canvas business model, whatever, will work, and you'll make tons of money only if these assumptions are true. These assumptions need to be sufficient and necessary and sufficient. So you start from there, and this is why I always, at every weekly meetings, insist that this is the core of what you have to work on now if it's not finished. Then once you have your assumptions, so you have these questions. Then the next question is, how do you intend to measure it? What are you going to look at? Because these questions are really hard to answer. I mean, asking your target audience is one way. So conducting interviews, surveys, definitely one way. There are a lot of biases when you ask people what they think they want, what they think they would do. It's much better to put them into some experiments, some context, and let's observe what they actually do. Like, do people like giving to charities? Yes. How many people give to charities? Not that many. So it's better to set up experiments. And so you you'll have a set of metrics that, if pass, if it's a quantitative matrix, pass a certain threshold, would make your assumption true, if not invalid. It could be qualitative metrics as well. Like you have, I don't know if it's a survey, it could be, hey, what do you think about this, this and that, and A, B, C, D, and if he answers like B, it's invalid, C, it's valid, and A, B, D, and that. So there are many ways that you can set up these metrics. It's good to have a set of metrics so that you don't rely on one point of data, but several. And only then, once you know what you want to measure, you set up your experiment, and that's your MVP. So you start from the learn, what you want to learn, how to measure it, and build the tool, the vessel, to measure these data. But that's just for one cycle. The goal of the startup is to repeat that cycle very often, so you can keep learning new things and then test some other assumptions. The more you learn, the more actually you'll have questions. And the more you answer this question, the more you'll have some other questions, but the closer you will get to your end goal, and the more you'll build or have a vision, a clear vision about what you should build for your audience. So speed is actually very important, because if you spend too much time just making like one loop, then you won't have that much time to learn. It's going to take too much time to actually learn and test some other stuff. So as I said, I'm not going to make a very theoretical presentation about MVPs, but rather try to illustrate some common types of MVP with classical examples of companies that you probably know, see how they started. And starting with the explainer video. So the explainer video, as you all know, you've visited many websites, and there's this 1, 2, or 3 minutes video that explains what the service is about. And in most cases, when a startup does that, at the very beginning, what's shown in the video is not actually the real product. In most of cases, when they actually start, and in this case, you're going to see Dropbox. When they started, they just had this and didn't build anything. So you can just watch very quickly. It's just a 2-minute video, and you'll see how crappy it is.
Or maybe you left your keys at home. The problem is organization. You need one place for everything, like a magic pocket. Putting something in the magic pocket means it's always there, no matter what you wear or where you are. The same thing is true for computers. If you have more than one, keeping track of all of your files can be a pain. Solving this problem is one of the big ideas behind Dropbox. It's like a magic pocket, a single, secure place for all of your stuff. Let's meet Josh, who is preparing for a big trip to Africa. Right now, all of his trip info is spread across his laptop, desktop, and phone. He needs to consolidate it all, and is tired of having to email files to himself or move them around with a USB drive. Then he found Dropbox, which creates a new kind of folder on his computers. These folders work hard to be exactly alike, even across Macs and PCs. By adding his itinerary to his laptop Dropbox, he can be sure the same file will show up in his desktop Dropbox and even on his phone. The same thing happens when he saves a document in a Dropbox folder. The document gets updated across all of his Dropboxes. But it's not just his computers. The Dropbox website also works to be exactly like his other Dropboxes. Anything he puts in Dropbox is available on the website automatically. This way, if his Jeep takes a dive and his computer is ruined, he can still get to his files on the Dropbox website, where they're always backed up. As it turns out, Josh's Safari was a success, and his laptop made it home with lots of videos and photos to share. Instead of emailing everything, he just shared a Dropbox folder with his mom, so she could get copies of photos she wants to frame. Because it worked so well for travel, Josh made Dropbox the home for all of his stuff, so it's accessible anytime, wherever he goes. Whether you're traveling the world, running a business, or simply organizing your life, Dropbox means you can stop worrying about managing files and backups and get on with your next adventure. You can download Dropbox now at Dropbox.com.
How do you like the video? from a design point of view.
Great.
It's great, right?
What was it? S3. We were delayed.
But so I mean, this literally takes like no time to do that. Maybe, I mean, if you maybe 2 days, maybe a week at max. It's not very time consuming. I think one thing that's very good here, as you notice, they really started with what's the pain, and here's our solution, and then explain how it works using like a story, the guy going to Africa, and then talks about the values. So it's really like purely in Canvas explained in a video. Even the target audience, if you are a business, a family, or just a guy trying to organize a trip. So they have the whole in Canvas in a 2-minute video. So they made that video. They didn't build anything, and they shared it with their network. And overnight, they got 75,000 sign-ups. They were pretty sure that they were on something of interest. And of course, we know the story, and they got successful, and now they're worth like a ton of money. But so basically, the only investment was to make a video, posting it on, I don't even know if they posted it on a website or on a landing page or on any video platform at the time. But they just, they posted it on the landing page because they had to sign up opt-in. Another example, actually, when I was thinking about example for this one, I remember there was back in 2010, there was like this startup called Logbar, still around today, and they made something called The Ring. I don't know if any of you ever heard about them. And I remember very well that one of my friends who was pitching at the same startup contest, one of the major one in Tokyo, got pissed because this company won with just an explainer video and no product. And their product explaining the video was actually a ring, which would allow you to control any device, like your TV or aircon or anything, just using gesture, pressing and making some gesture. So they just had this concept and wanted to test it, and yeah, they are doing pretty well. They're still around. They're making through some other devices, and they're from Japan. So just with the video, it's a very good way to measure how interest you can get, whether it's by putting it on a landing page and measuring signups, or pitching it at a startup contest and see how the audience reacts to it. So another type of MVP is the landing page. We tried that actually with Unitely. We were not successful, but as an example, Buffer. So all of you know about Buffer. It's like it's a platform now that allows you to schedule posts on socials. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+, many others, so that you don't have to be behind your computer at the time where you want to post it. You can schedule those posts in advance in many different ways, but they just started with simple concept using Twitter, and that was actually the landing page at the time. There was like 2 pages where you notice how simple it is. There is no design at all. It's very, very pure. Just like one line explaining what it does, how it works, 1, 2, 3, and just a call to action. The call to action would lead to, like you see, like it's plans and pricing. So it's not like a next or something. Plans and pricing, somebody who clicks on plans and pricing is already kind of interested. And it will lead to another page saying, hey, hello, you called us before we are ready, and basically we don't have a product yet, but if you want to know, once it's ready, you can just enter your email address and we'll let you know. So they started doing that, and they collected quite a few email addresses. So not only that allowed them to gauge the interest for the product, but also they reached out to those people who signed up, one by one, asking like how they intended to use it, what they would like their service to do, and so they gathered already like all this feedback on how to build the product that they hadn't built at the time. The second thing they wanted to test is whether people would pay for it, which is a different thing. There are lots of products that people could be interested in, but maybe not pay for it, like Vibe. And lots of people got quite a bunch of signups, but people actually don't really pay for it. So they introduced another page in between those two with actually the plans. So they wanted to see like they introduced this extra step to see if people would actually be willing to pay for it. So that's it. That was 2-page MVP, gather some feedback, talk to the audience. I think this is also a crucial point that it's usually like alongside the MVP is to talk to the audience directly through survey, through email, face-to-face if possible. That's ideal, but really gathering this feedback in a quick fashion is really the key. Another type of MVP is a manual first, or otherwise called without the O's MVP. It's something which pretends that it works like automatically, but actually you're doing the hard work behind the scene. And Groupon started like this under a different name called The Point. Their initial idea, actually, they didn't do well for the very first idea, and they didn't use the lean startup method, but they had this web page. Actually, their first concept was to unite people to do something they couldn't do alone, but if there were enough people to do it together, they could actually do it, whether it's like complain about a retailer or something like this, or unite behind a cause. This didn't work, but they built that business or that concept. Took them like 11 months, and it failed. They learned from it. Like, hey, it took us like almost a year to figure out that it didn't work. Maybe we should try something faster the next time. So they pivoted the idea. They still use the concept of gathering people together to do something, to get some advantage when you are more than on your own. And so that's where Groupon came from. That's not the website at the time. I couldn't find any image of what the website looked like, but they actually did use a WordPress, a customized WordPress, where every day the founder would post an offer as a blog post on their website. And what they would do is they would get some customers sign up for that offer, and they would manually generate a PDF that they would send to those customers by email, and just try to do that until it was not manageable by just one guy, and had to like automate that process. But they started with just a WordPress. That's once again something that you can do in just a day. Zappos, that was another interesting concept. So their idea was, or the business model that they had in mind actually when they first started, is that are people willing to buy shoes online? Which was a not obvious one, because people like to try shoes. It's something that you have to feel comfortable. So they were not sure that it would actually work. But there was like shoes is a massive market. Everybody, almost everybody on earth is wearing shoes, but nobody was selling them online. So they felt that there might be an opportunity, but they weren't sure about that. So again, simple web page, and they went to the local shops around where their office or where they were living, and took photos of a few models at the local shoe shops, and were waiting for people to buy them online. And as soon as somebody would make a purchase, they would actually go physically to buy the shoes themselves to the store and ship it to the customer. And up to a certain point where it was not manageable to do that by humans, they really like build a business around it with the infrastructure, the logistics, the stocks, and everything. But again, just a simple web page.
So how they make margin?
What do you mean?
They buy the shoes from a local store.
So
if you buy shoes from a local store, why don't go to the store? Because it's going to be like cheaper.
That's the thing. I'm not sure they were making a profit margin at the beginning. Maybe they were selling at the retail price. The point was that they wanted to check if people would be interested to buy online, maybe for convenience, saving time, and so on and so forth. So that's what they wanted to test. They didn't want to test if they could make a profit margin. Maybe they could have sell the shoes like 5%, 10% more expensive, maybe. But that was not the initial idea. They knew that if they would be scaling the business, they could go get these shoes at a lower price and make a profit anyway. Then you have a slightly different type of MVP, which is concierge MVP. So Airbnb, which was actually Air Bed and Breakfast, kind of a long name for startup, and they started like this. They were two guys living in San Francisco, and wanted to start a business. They didn't know exactly what at the time, but the fact was that they were living in San Francisco and they didn't have enough money to pay their rents, and they were like this design conference in town, and what they thought was to rent some part of their loft during the time of their conference to some other people and see if actually some people would be interested to stay at someone's place instead of a hotel. And so what they did is they set up a simple landing page and took a few photos of their apartment, put them online, and after a few days they got like 3 people. That's exactly how many people they could fit into their apartments. A father from the US, another woman from the US, and a guy from India coming to the conference. And they felt like, hey, actually people do want to stay at someone's apartment. And the next thing they did is that they repeated the experience, but using also some of their friends who wanted to host or make some extra box with a spare room that they had, and they see that it was still working, so they grew up the business from there. But they just, once again, started with something very, very simple web page, took the photos themselves, nothing was automated, and we're waiting for the people to sign up. So now it's still very successful. It's a $10 billion company. I think there was another part where I found that was very like startup-y, the way they grew, and they already got some funding in between, but they realized that the photo were really crappy once it was already like kind of big, people posting apartments. They realized the photo on the website is pretty crappy. It's not really attractive for the business, which relies on just photos mainly, photos and location. So what they did is that they wanted to see actually if the performance was affected by the quality of the photo. So they went to New York, where they have the most listing, and just door to door to their customers went and proposed to take those nice quality photo for free for them. And they did that, and they updated the page, and they saw the demand just over 1 week rise after they did that on those properties with the high quality photo. So again, like very manual, just they had an assumption it was not working as well because of the poor quality photo, and did it on their own.
They still do it actually.
They still do it?
Yeah, they have like a photographer at Airbnb, so they are freelance.
Yeah.
And the service is free.
So that's amazing. They know they can make more money anyway.
Yeah, they are like everywhere in the world. So, but actually the photographer pay a shit. They get like shitty money probably.
That's another issue which I won't be discussing today. Fundraising is another one. I try to rush a bit. What's best to gauge if people want to pay for your stuff than actually fundraise, right? So fundraising, Kickstarter, Peyrot. I don't know if you've heard about Peyrot. That was kind of like the precursor for wearables. It was not a smartwatch. It was a watch using like an e-paper display. So one of the very first one, and they did a Kickstarter. Actually, their goal was just $100,000, and they raised 100 times that, if my math are good, from close to 70,000 people. So that's a very good way to gauge the interest for a product. Fundraising is particularly good for anything that requires like very high fixed cost. So of course hardware, something maybe like in very traditional industry where there's a lot of maybe logistics or things like this. Yeah. Actually, this one is kind of a mix with the explainer video because most of Kickstarter now they also use explainer video. Single feature MVP. So for many MVPs, actually, what they also try to do is they feel that it could be simple enough to start building the product, starting with the single most important feature that actually delivers the value. So if your product cannot do that in one feature, probably it's not the best type of MVP, but if it can, then why not? Foursquare did that way. It was not single, it was kind of like 2 features. It was like checking and reward. So they wanted to see if people would be willing to receive reward for checking at places. So they built just that. It's maybe takes a bit more time than just a week, and maybe not that much more, but they just measured that. So how many people were like checking and get reward and repeat this. And that was basically what they were measuring. And they actually didn't build any additional feature for almost a year. So they really tried to make that flow work well until actually adding stuff. Wanted to share a personal story, also on something we've done with Hugo. I don't know if most of you have met him. We had a startup, and I think that was back in 2010. We had an idea for one of our service. It was called One Cardo. So the idea was to replicate the stamp card on your mobile using QR code. So whenever you go to a restaurant, for instance, instead of like having your paper card that they would stamp, you would just like scan with your app a QR code at the cashier, and you would get a stamp. So you get like all your stamp cards here. I'm not a designer, but I made those few screens. We had like maybe like 8 screens, just to explain what the flow was. I just put 3 of them here, but basically you had your list of restaurants you added, seeing how far you are from the rewards, and then see like your stamps as you would check in every time. And once you finish your card, then you could redeem whatever the shop would be ready to offer you. Free coffee, a 10% discount, or something else. And so we actually didn't build anything. We just had this idea, and I literally spent like, I think less than 2 days on making those screens. Maybe just 1 day. And the next thing that we've done, we were like 3, and we went to all the restaurants that we knew about. So the one we would go for lunch around our workplace, and the one we would meet on over the weekend, and went to those guys and just knocked at their door and asked them, hey, we have an app that does this. What do you think? Do you want to sign up? So that was really intimidating. And our goal was to like see how people would react. And I think in less than an hour and a half, we got already like 3 shops saying like, hey, I'm signing up for that. So after 3, we say like, okay, let's stop and go to the next step. But basically, we could see that there was a high interest for the shop to do that. And actually, we said like it was for like 1,000 yen a month, so there was not much money, but we still wanted to charge them to see if they would be ready to pay for it. So the next thing we did, actually, Hugo had to make an Android app in 2 weeks. So it was very shitty, very buggy, but I think at least we had something to deliver. What we've done though, when we went to those shops, we didn't say we didn't have an app, or we didn't have a business, or we didn't have anything, because we didn't have anything. We just had these screens. I didn't even use like something where you tap somewhere. I just had like, there was like simple photos, and I was just swiping, but they were not paying that much attention. They were not so excited, so they didn't know it was not an app. Just swiping from one image to another to explain the flow. Basically a day and a half, and we had nothing. And we just told them, like, if you want to sign up, it's going to take 2 weeks. And basically that's the time it took us to deliver them like with just a QR code and something that said they could show to their customers where to download the app. That's how it started. Then we got like restaurants, and we got some interest from like one of the restaurant owner, his wife was having a nail salon, and said, hey, my wife would be interested as well. So, hey, hair salon and nail salon might actually be a good target as well. And then we explained it to those guys. And then we were working from a shared office, and actually the guys from the shared office were interested as well. They said, like, shared office, okay, let's do that. So we didn't have all these ideas at the beginning, but it just expanded naturally as we were like interacting with the market. It didn't work eventually because the cost of acquisition versus the cost of running and taking care of these clients was not a good business model, but at least we could get money before actually building something. So there are many other types of MVP or MVPs. I don't want to. The list is not exhaustive. Most of the types I showed here are very relevant, mainly for B2C. B2B is a bit more tricky, especially because the target is much more narrow. So you should, in most cases, you have to interact more, and you can less rely on doing something to release to the whole world and stay behind your screen. So that's why it's also a bit harder, but there are many ways to still test your assumptions. So that's about it. I just wanted to ask you, what's to the project leaders right now, like, what would you say is your MVP, Salah?
We we're making fake job posts and fake candidates, and seeing if people would be and sending the candidates normal CV and our take on the CV and see which one would get more interest, basically.
Okay. Darren?
Create deeper people connections in the workplace.
So what's the MVP? What was the initial MVP?
It was like almost like a paper prototype that I put together. He managed all the emails sent into our team, and we'd see who would adopt it and who would play. We did one round, and yeah, I think everyone played in our first MVP, but it validated our assumption metric initially.
Is that the concierge, is it?
Yeah, it's kind of the concierge, yeah. Absolutely. Junji?
So our assumption is internal recruiter willing to provide more information to candidates for better experience. So our MVP is user testing to check if they actually spend more time on providing information.
So it's more like a one feature MVP.
Yeah.
Just like that.
I think everyone also has landing pages.
And everybody has landing pages. Absolutely. So in a nutshell, so an MVP is not, in most cases, maybe apart from the one feature MVP, is not just a basic version of your product that later becomes more complex. In most cases, that's not the case. It's not something to test whether it's technically feasible or if the team actually has the skill or can do it. It's really something, product, I think it's more of an experiment in most cases that only exists in order to help the team learn. Again, we go back to that loop, something about customers and their behavior based on the assumptions that you define. MVP is minimal, but it's not because something is minimal that it's necessarily an MVP. So I think everybody already is on the right track for the project. So I really hope we're going to learn more and faster in the weeks to come. Thank you. Questions?
You talked a little bit about B2B and enterprise. Did you find any good cases of MVP for enterprise or B2B? I can't think of any really.
I mean, Dropbox eventually they had a B2B offering as well, but
it was more B2C from the beginning, though, right?
I've specifically searched for it, to be honest. So I don't have any case. I know that many B2B businesses, the way they started, it's from people in the industry who actually left their day job and they saw that there was a potential that their company was not exploiting and decided to start a business on their side. So that's a pattern I've seen in several occasions, including my previous company. So I think that's how many B2B companies are actually created. For B2B2C, there are lots of startups actually who focus on the B2C part first, see that it's working, and then go to the B later, say look, there is value for you here. If you think of Monitory, that's exactly what they are doing. They started with providing a service for free to anybody to use to manage your spending across credit card, bank accounts. Lots of data from customers on how they spend their money. And then went to the banks or other financial services and say hey, we have some good data that you guys might be interested to.
So that leads to a second question. So we're in the business of mostly B2B for C, right?
Yeah.
C, not really customer, but
Candidates.
could be candidates, yeah? Who do you think we should validate first? The customer, which is the B, or their customer, which is the C? So this is kind of
that's a question which I thought I had an answer, and I changed my mind several times about it. So eventually, my safe answer would be it depends on the business model, because I think I've seen pros and cons of doing one or the other. In some cases, it's better to focus when they're kind of an equal balance and there is not that much dependence. You need this one first. It's more like the chicken and egg. You need both at the same time. In those cases, I've noticed that maybe focusing on the one paying you is the most important one, so the one you should give a better focus. But otherwise, I think it really depends on the business model. Any other question?
When is an MVP not being successful?
What is it?
When is an MVP not being successful? Or when is a product been built that's not an MVP being successful?
To your first question, when is an MVP not successful? So the success of an MVP is not whether you validate or invalidate your assumption. It's when you don't get to learn what you want to learn. I think if you build something with a set of things that you want to measure and that MVP doesn't allow you to get this data, then that's not a good MVP.
And what about products that have been built that didn't do the MVP process and just went straight to beta?
So what would be the question?
What about products that are successful now that didn't go through an MVP process?
Oh yeah, I think there are many. So, well, if you're not in a non-startup environment, so basically what we're doing is we're exploring markets that are not known. So we don't know if there is a potential for it. So if you build a product in known markets, there's less uncertainty. So you could potentially skip the phase about learning, just like, hey, ramen is something that works all across Japan. In the city, there are no ramen shop. Let's open one. It's less risky, and you know that you don't need to make tons of learning cycle before you know if it's going to work or not. But yeah, and otherwise, I don't know if I have any example to give. I think luck in me. I mean, whether it's life or business is 50% or more.
Do you think money can validate an MVP?
I think that's the ultimate validation.
So if I give you one company, one example to prove that it's not validating, like take Mailbox. They built a product, so it was like a mailbox, like revolutionary. And actually what they just did, it's like the CEO, they send email to like all of those people, like really important in the Silicon Valley, because they know like Zuckerberg a company. And what they did, it's just in 1 month, they had like enough people to talk about it to be acquired by Dropbox. And now Mailbox is down after like 2 years, but they got acquired for like 100 million in 1 month. That was the biggest like acquisition in like.
So what's your point?
It's like sometimes the money don't validate.
But okay. For me, there is a big difference between like generating money and raising funding or being acquired, because there are lots of companies that raise funds or are acquired but generate like zero money. So as long as they don't generate money, you have no proof that their business is actually working or that people actually want to pay for it. It's just like if people invest or acquire a company, that's a bet for the future that they can deliver at some point, but nothing's proven. Those, in some respect, is unvalidated.
Okay, I think we're running out of time. We've run out of time.
Yeah. Last question.
When does it not become an MVP, the product?
When does it not become an MVP?
So you've gone through the process, you've validated. Do you do another MVP of your MVP, or do you go straight to beta or V1?
So when do you stop making an MVP and start making the actual product?
I mean, if your core assumptions are validated with a sample large enough, I think that's enough to go to the next phase. I don't think there is like a straight line between MVP and beta. I think you should still start to continue to keep learning. It's not like MVP, alpha, beta, product, release, IPO. These are milestones, but it's like there is a gray zone in between those. So.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Like big money.
Like money.
Big money.
Boston accent.
I don't think I could hold one for more than like a minute.
Okay, just making sure I'm recording the right one.
What's going on? We good?
We good.
Okay. All right, guys. So I'm going to talk about pricing for software as a service.
in a way, kind of building off of Fred's and relevant because we're going through this cycle where we're making more things. And I think it's important to be thinking more about how you're going to price things. So start with something probably anybody who's ever taken any sort of business class or read an article about business has seen. It's the 4 Ps of marketing or the marketing mix. These are the 4 big things that make up marketing. So product, place, price, and promotion. For some reason, people tend to forget about price. It's like an afterthought. People get really excited about creating their product, thinking about where they're going to sell it, how they're going to promote it, and then at the end they just pump out a spreadsheet with their price with very little thought, or they just slap a price on based on what their competitors are doing. But in reality, price is probably the most important one of those 4 Ps because it determines a lot of things about your product, such as your market position, where you are in relation to your competition. It determines the demand for your product. Most products are elastic, which means that their price is, or the demand is affected by changes in price, and software as a service is also generally a pretty elastic product. It affects the perception of your product by the customers, whether or not they can actually buy it from you in the first place, and whether or not you'll be able to provide the level of service that they require. So these are pretty important things, and yet for some reason people, just type up an Excel spreadsheet with their margins and pump out a number and slap it on their pages, and that's something you kind of want to avoid. So I'm going to go through some tips for pricing these things, but first I'm just going to make it clear I'm not an expert on this. They're just things that I've picked up through classes and read about, and I became more interested in it specifically for this topic when we were doing the vibe strategy discussions, and I started looking more at like the landing page and stuff like that. So I'm going to skim over a lot of things because you typically would have to take a whole class on this sort of thing. Some people take a whole minor for just pricing and marketing. So if I don't have all the answers, I have some resources for you guys afterwards. So first, avoid cost-based pricing when it comes to something like software. The customer does not care how much your product costs to make. They don't give a crap about that. So as I was saying, it should be an input on your spreadsheet, not an output. If you're doing cost-based pricing, you're ignoring the competition, and you're also ignoring the customer and what kind of value they see in your product. So that's not to say that there shouldn't be financial considerations, but there should be more to it than just the number that you get to cover your costs. Yeah, that's not all. So a good place to start, I think, especially when you have your MVP or your beta is flat pricing because it's easy. You can just put a simple number there. But you have to be careful with this. You have to remember that businesses are going to have more complex needs. You're probably going to end up with more than one buyer persona. So you don't want to just put one number there and leave it. I think when Buffer actually started, they only had one flat pricing plan, and their metric, well, they didn't really have a value metric. It was just free or $10, and that was it. And later they evolved to have, I think they have 4 or 5 different plans now that are tailored to each type of customer that they see coming to their website. So you want to make sure that as your product grows, if it makes sense, that you expand on your pricing so that you can get the maximum value from your customers. All right, so considering value and pricing, this is important. So as I said before, customers don't really care what it costs you to create and maintain your software, especially software as a service when you have these monthly fees and stuff. It's a little different when it comes to video games or something, and that's where people might get confused. But yeah, generally they just don't care. What you should always be asking yourself is what's in it for them. Through pretty much every step of making whatever you're making, I think you should be asking what's in it for them, but especially when you're pricing it. So a good rule of thumb that you'll see if you do a little research, this always pops up, is the 10x rule. So figure out how much value your product provides to your customers and price your product at 10% of that to start. That's a good place to start. You know, this little graph over here shows a pretty good place for your ideal price would be where your value perception or the customer's value perception meets your value proposition. Now, there's no like exact way to get these numbers. A lot of this is always going to be qualitative. You don't always have any like exact equation to figure out how much your product is going to be worth to your customer, especially when you haven't made something yet, when you have an MVP or whatever. So you have to put in a little work. So you need to spend time understanding how customers use your product and features, or how they would if you don't actually have it yet. Develop those customer personas and use those to optimize your features and the value metrics that you're using for your product and your pricing. And it's okay to look at your competition, but don't assume that they got it right. You don't know how well their pricing scheme is working for them, or their pricing page for that matter. And most importantly, spend time talking to people. You can't really get an idea of how much somebody values something if you don't talk to them. And also, just to build off something Fred half said there at the end when you were answering the question, the most important feedback you can get comes from the people who are paying for your product. Generally, those free users aren't going to have the kind of input you want when you're looking to measure the value that people are getting from your product, or the maximum value that people can get. So I mentioned value metrics. So these are the things that you are pricing your product on. So pretty much the features that you're listing on your pricing page, for example, those are value metrics. And they should be aligned with the user's needs, and they should be easy to understand, and they should be scalable. So the best way to see that is through some examples, I think. So we'll look at some pricing pages in a bit. Another thing, don't always just go for the 3-tiered Goldilocks pricing. It doesn't always make sense. Sometimes it does, but a lot of people either do it just because they see that all the other companies are doing it. I think like 80% of software as a service that have a pricing page have a 3-tiered pricing page. And it doesn't always make sense for that company. So we have an example of why it's not good using Kissmetrics, and their pricing scheme has a $200 plan, a $700 plan, and then a $2,000 plan. So this is their demand curve, and you can see in all the yellow spaces they're leaving out a bunch of customers, and potential customers that they could be getting if their value metric included everybody. But let's say if you used something that went like per user and covered everybody and scaled exactly with however many people are using your product, you can cover everything under the demand curve and make sure you're making as much money as you possibly can. So just give it more thought before you just throw some tiers on there just because it's pretty and everybody's doing it. That's really the key point. Free tiers, not always necessary. You should really think about that before you just start with a free level of service. So you need to think about what your free customers are bringing to the table, whether it's data or feedback, whatever it is. You need to be getting something out of it. Otherwise, there's really no point in having free users. So a study showed that there's the most successful freemium SAS ventures, they only have a 3% conversion rate on those free accounts. And that's because psychologically, once you have somebody hooked on something free and they're getting most of the features for that price or that lack of a price, it's pretty much impossible to get them to pay. So flipping somebody over without some huge change is going to be really hard if you have a free option and you aren't sort of constantly encouraging them and letting them know that the paid version is going to offer more value for them. So typically free trials are going to be better. Let them know that this is a paid product, but they can get some free time with it. But of course, this depends on the product. Product to product is going to change. don't just set it and forget it. So prices should have MVPs as well. Minimum viable pricing. See what I did there? So a lot of people think that pricing should be part of your early validation stages. It should be something you're always thinking about. And if you are familiar with all of the pieces of marketing, that makes sense because pricing should be equally as important as everything else. So you should be considering it early on, doing iterations of prices, just seeing, even if it's just getting feedback on whether or not people would pay this price for what they can see so far. It's a pretty good place to start. You can do A/B testing with different prices, and you should constantly be changing it. I mean, like, when you start your product, a lot of startups, they like to start with like maybe a group of 100 people and it's at this price. And if they find that they can charge more or if they need to charge less, they'll let those people keep paying that and send them an email, but then change the price and keep on testing and iterating until they find the right one. There's another one of those rules, like the 10x rule, where basically it's the 20% pushback. So you can keep raising your price until you get pushed back on that price from 20% of your customers. A lot of companies are afraid to raise the price, and because of that, one of the most common problems when like a consultant comes in for price issues is that they're underpriced. And there's usually other reasons linked to that that are not price related, but so pricing pages, we can look at some stuff now, some examples. So first, some things that you can do to help. This isn't everything, but the few of the easier or more interesting little tips that you guys have probably seen before. I wouldn't be surprised. So first one, use charm pricing. They do this in stores, but it also works for your software.
Does that only work in the US?
It does. It does.
Like, it doesn't work in Japan.
I think it does.
Does it? Like, have you seen this?
999 yen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
199 yen.
No, 900. Yeah, just 999.
I think it's definitely, things are different in Japan, especially with pricing. You have to be careful when you price anything here. And I didn't make any slides about that, but I do have some opinions on that, things that I picked up from classes that I can talk about after. But in general, in Western countries, I think this works because people get the illusion that it's cheaper than it actually is. So it doesn't have to be like $2.99 or something like that, like adding cents. But even if you have a $50 plan and you make it a $49 plan, the brain is saying, "Oh, that's in the $40 range, so it's better than $50." So there's an actual example of this. I'm not sure exactly what their app was, but this startup, Gumroad, they actually did 2 tests with the 2 types of pricing, and they had much higher conversion rates from free to their paid.
Right.
Yep.
Does it work on like bigger prices? I know for like small values, let's just say it's like $999 and stuff.
I think I can answer that.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't really matter with how expensive or not the thing is. It's more about the type of product.
Yeah.
So like something like a luxury product, perfume, something fancy. People don't want to buy something cheap. They are ready to spend the money. So I heard they've shown that like perfume that were underpriced or like cheap were not selling. So in those cases, it's more about like the perception of the product, I think.
And also, those products that Fred mentioned, luxury products, those are usually pretty inelastic. So you can put the price to literally whatever you want, and people are going to buy
On the
it.
contrary, usually you can get higher demand from higher price and lower price up to a certain point.
Even better, yeah. But yeah, so like you can price whatever you want, like I said, and people are going to buy it. Those things. So basically, they group it under inelastic, but I think they're just saying that you won't have demand drops by raising the price. Highlight your best converting plan on your pricing page. It sounds simple, but we don't always do it. And even here, we don't exactly do it. Make sure it's clear who each plan is targeting. It can be like a little byline that explains like a 1-sentence persona for what this plan is good for, or simply not just naming your plans like standard and pro and things like that. Take advantages of biases like anchoring. You can do this in a lot of ways. Instead of having an enterprise plan, you can have a super expensive plan that nobody's ever going to buy, but it's still, they see that on the page, and suddenly the other plans look much more valuable. You can even be different and put your most expensive plan first, and from there it's the first thing they see, and then they're like, wow, look at these sweet discounts. So yeah, take advantage of these things. Address FUDs, fears, uncertainties, and doubts. So, you know, they might not always be sure what they're getting. You can offer things like a money-back guarantee, or, you know, use our free trial. For the most part, we do that, but you'd be surprised how many don't do that. So you'd be surprised how many startups don't, or software as a service don't even have a pricing page. It's like 80% of software as a service still doesn't have a pricing page at this point. So, yeah. All right, so some examples of good ones. Salesforce. Each tier is clearly set to a specific persona. So you can see they have like a little line that says exactly what this plan is for. And down here in their features, instead of just listing some things, they're grouped into what you can do with those features, how it's going to affect your business. So you immediately know what's for you. You can sort it by what you need or what you don't want to need, what you want to accomplish. So this is a good way to do things and let your customer know that they're getting exactly what they're looking for. And they found that people rarely bought the plan that they didn't need. It's very easy to, you know, just go on and say immediately, this is me, this is what I need, and you don't end up buying the wrong one. HubSpot, this one's really good. So they had a really good value metric that scales. So basically, their core value metric is based on contacts, and then every time you add an extra 1,000, you have to pay a little bit more, but it gets to a point where eventually it would make more sense to just upgrade. They also highlight their most popular option. The only thing I don't like here is that they didn't highlight the call to action in the most popular option. I think that would have helped. But their value metric, I think, was very smart. All right, so there's some bad examples. Microsoft. This is a mess. You go to their page, and they clearly have way too many different personas that they're trying to target. And that's not even everything, because then you can see those extra options over there. You have this, if you want Office Home, you have 5 different options for Windows, but then you have to go to a separate page where you have 3 different options for Mac. So it's just a huge mess. And then you have all these different business options, and you have to navigate through so many things just to figure out which one would be right for you or for your company. It's just one of the worst examples I've ever seen, honestly. This one, Zozy. So I think it's like a travel company, but it's way too simple. Like they're trying to go with this whole minimalist thing, but it's not very transparent. You have this one part on their pricing page, and then it just says priced from. So you're looking at it and you're like, wow, they have one pricing plan. But then as soon as you go in for more details, you realize like they can charge you for a bunch of crap that they didn't actually list on their website once you get in touch with them. All right, Chargeify. So this one actually, at a glance, looks really nice. But if you look at their first 2 plans and you look at the main features that are there, there's no real differentiation, but you're paying more money. Like, they explain that this one's more for business, but then you look down and you still have the same amount of paying customers and the same amount of non-paying customers, but you have to pay $50 more. So not a great choice there for them. All right, Vibe. So
Start with a bad example,
yeah. There's some good there too, though. There's some good. It's kind of hard to see right now, though. First of all, I brought this up today, but we had 2 different versions that had different features listed and different trial lengths, so that's a problem. But we'll fix that. But anyway, you might notice the very first thing, like when you look at this, is that
there were 2 different versions.
because they have
on at the same time.
Oh, is it?
they have 2 different places there.
I think they're currently on
No.
right now.
It's one of the ways that they did that here.
So the place where your eye first falls naturally is over here, the first plan, which is free, which also has the highlighted call to action and the biggest list of features. So that's a problem, I think, because you have no reason to look this way anymore. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your value metrics are at that point, because you're like, wow, I get all this stuff and I don't have to pay anything. And if I do want more channels, I guess I'll just make more accounts. So. I mean, there's some things we couldn't avoid because we had limitations with PayPal, and we didn't get to use Stripe and make it all cool and stuff. What I do like is that we had the big number for the enterprise plan instead of having like contact us, so you can anchor people to that price. But this kind of cancels it out. Also, we don't highlight our most, like the plan we want them to pay for. I mean, it is a bright, pretty color, but we don't do anything because that's also a bright, pretty color. So we need something to say like, this is our recommended plan, or this is the most popular plan. And then immediately under the pricing, it tells people, please try the free version first. So you're already right there saying like, we don't have confidence in our premium, so please try it first. We recommend giving the free version a test drive. Like, that's rough. I think we'd be better off with all paid plans here and free trials. It could even be like a 3-month free trial for the lowest tier or something. So, I mean, it could have looked a lot better. This is Darren's mock-up for if we had used Stripe. So it's not like we didn't have the ideas there. It could have been upgraded and nice. So I think the main problem was just kind of neglect. It was set and forget, and you can see that through the examples with having 2 different ones and never really playing with the price as much as we were playing with all the features and stuff. Also another thing here, that thing I mentioned where we have more features here than others, there's an easy way around this that a lot of pricing pages do. So right above or below your pricing, you can have a small section that says these are the core features. And have a cool little picture explaining each one, and then here just say all of Vibe's core features, and then core features plus this and this, and that way you give that illusion that you're getting more as you go up. But yeah, this does it pretty well. We highlight what we want to highlight. We actually have well, not really, but
it's hard to get to.
But the features do actually become different and look more valuable and important as you go on. So that's the most important, and we're, calling out those call to actions with a nice color. So I think this would have been nice if we had that ability to use that pricing style. And yeah, that's it. So that's the only goal here. I mean, there's way too much that for me to cover about pricing. I just want you guys to think about it more when you're doing this.
Any ideas for how to price big chats?
Can you add big chats on there too?
Yeah, you do.
I can't access the product page from the Air website, so you did that. Oh, okay. I mean, I can think about it and let you know off the top of my head, though. I don't know.
Do you feel that people pay